The hallways of the Veyrath Galactic Combat Academy were built for giants. The ceilings stretched high enough for a Gorvathi war chief to walk without bending. The doors were wide enough for a Drenaki to pass through with all four arms spread. Everything about this place was made for creatures that were big, strong, and dangerous. Kira Vasquez was none of those things. She was 12 years old. She was human, and she was quite possibly the smallest living thing in the entire station that was not someone's pet. She walked through those enormous hallways every morning with her boots clicking on the dark metal floor, her datapad held against her chest and her eyes forward. She did not look up at the aliens towering around her. She did not slow down when their shadows fell over her. She simply walked, like a small fish swimming calmly through a sea full of sharks. The Academy sat on Calyx Prime, a neutral station world that floated between 3 star systems. It was the most respected military training school in the known galaxy. Every powerful species sent their best young warriors here. The Drenaki sent their strongest. The Gorvathi sent their fiercest. The Velith sent their sharpest. And 14 years ago, when humanity was finally accepted into the compact of species, humans were invited to send students too. Not many came. The galaxy did not think much of humans. They had no claws, no natural armor, no venom, no psychic abilities. Their bodies were soft. Their bones broke easily. They were classified as a Class 12 endurance species, which was a polite way of saying they were considered the weakest intelligent species in the compact. Most aliens saw humans as a curiosity, like a strange animal that had somehow learned to build starships. She heard the whispers every day. She sat alone in the commissary that morning, eating a meal that the Academy food machines had tried their best to make taste like scrambled eggs. It did not taste like scrambled eggs. It tasted like warm sand with hope. She ate it anyway. A soft glow appeared beside her, and Lyra Sonef sat down. Lyra was Polari, a species that looked almost like a tall, thin human, but with skin that glowed with bioluminescent light. Her glow changed color with her emotions. Right now it was a gentle blue, which meant she was calm, but a little worried. Lyra was always a little worried when it came to Kira. "You are eating alone again," Lyra said. "I was not alone," Kira said. "I was with my eggs." "Those are not eggs. I know, but if I believe hard enough, maybe they will become eggs." Lyra's glow flickered to a soft pink, which meant she was amused. She was Kira's only real friend at the Academy. The two of them had been assigned neighboring quarters on the first day, and Lyra had been the only student who did not look at Kira like she was lost. They had been together since. After breakfast, Kira went to tactical simulation class. This was the one class where her size did not matter, because it was all about thinking. The students sat in a curved amphitheater while holographic battle maps floated in the air before them. Instructor Jael Korath stood at the center, her 6 eyes scanning the room. She was Velith, an insectoid species with a hard exoskeleton and a mind like a blade. She never smiled because her face could not make that shape. But Kira sometimes thought she could see approval in the way her eyes moved. Today's simulation was a fleet engagement. 2 armadas meeting near a dying star. Every student had to devise a strategy to win with fewer ships. Most students went for direct assault or flanking maneuvers. The Drenaki students, in particular, favored brute force, crashing through the enemy center with everything they had. When it was Kira's turn, she studied the map for a long moment. Then she rerouted her smallest ships behind the dying star, used their engines to trigger a focused solar flare, and directed it into the enemy fleet's formation. The flare disrupted their shields and communications. Her remaining ships attacked the blinded fleet from 3 directions. The simulation ended in total victory, fastest completion time of the day. Instructor Jael said nothing. She simply noted something on her datapad and moved to the next student. but Kira saw 2 of her 6 eyes linger on her for a moment longer than usual. After class, Kira walked toward the training wing. She liked to watch the combat students practice, even though she was not scheduled for sparring that day. The training pit was a sunken arena surrounded by viewing rails, and today it was occupied by someone impossible to ignore. Torvax Rel stood nearly 3 meters tall. He was Drenaki, a reptilian species with thick bone plating across their body, 4 powerful arms, and ridges along their forearms that could secrete burning venom. He was 16 in equivalent years, the Academy's reigning junior combat champion, and he moved to his sparring partner like a storm through paper. His opponent, a Gorvathi student nearly as large as him, lasted less than 2 minutes. Torvax finished the fight with a casual backhand from his upper right arm that sent the Gorvathi spinning to the ground. He did not offer to help his opponent up. He simply turned and scanned the viewing rails with his cold yellow eyes. They found Kira. His mouth split into something that was not a smile. It was the expression a predator made when it spotted something too small to be a threat, but too interesting to ignore. "Look," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "They sent us a runt of a runt species." A few students laughed. Most just looked away. Kira said nothing. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then turned and walked away at her normal pace. Not faster, not slower. Just the same steady walk she always had. Lyra found her later, her glow flickering with distress. "He is dangerous, Kira. You should report him." "For what? Talking loud?" "For being cruel." Kira shrugged. "There are cruel people everywhere, even back home. You just walk past them." That night, alone in her small quarters, Kira sat on the edge of her bed and looked out the viewport at the stars. They were thick here, clustered together like scattered sugar. She watched them for a while, letting the silence settle around her. Then she opened the small case she kept under her bed. Inside was a worn mouthguard, old and slightly yellowed. Taped to the inside of the lid was a handwritten note in her father's rough handwriting. She had read it 100 times, but she read it again now. "Remember, Miha, small doesn't mean soft. Love, Papa." She closed the case, slid it back under her bed, and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be another day of giants looking down at her. She would walk through them the same way she always did. Steady, quiet, unbroken. 3 days passed, and Torvax did not forget about Kira. If anything, she had become his favorite target, and the reason was simple. She did not react. He knocked her datapad from her hands in the corridor on the first day. It clattered across the floor, and several students stepped over it. Kira picked it up without a word and kept walking. Torvax watched her go with a tightness in his jaw. On the second day, he blocked her path near the training wing, standing in the center of the hallway with his 4 arms crossed. He was enormous, a wall of bone plate and muscle. Kira looked up at him, waited 3 seconds, and then walked around him like he was a piece of furniture that someone had left in the wrong place. She did not speed up. She did not look back. "Prey animals," he said loudly to his friends as she passed. "They do not even know how to be afraid." During the midday meal, he walked past Kira's table and said, loud enough for the entire commissary to hear, "I do not understand why the compact allows food to sit with warriors." Lyra's glow turned a dark red. She started to stand, but Kira put a hand on her arm and shook her head. Lyra sat back down, trembling. "Why do you let him do this?" Lyra whispered. "Because he wants me to react," Kira said quietly, "and I will not give him what he wants." But Torvax was not the kind of person who stopped when he didn't get what he wanted. He was the kind of person who pushed harder. It happened during a group combat training exercise the next morning. Instructor Zale had divided the students into pairs for a basic defense drill. Kira was paired with a Drenaki named Sorath, one of Torvax's closest allies. Sorath was smaller than Torvax, but still twice Kira's size, with the same bone plating and 4 heavy arms. One student attacked, the other defended. It was meant to be controlled, measured, but from the first second, Sorath attacked with real force. His strikes were not practice blows, they were meant to hurt. The other students noticed. Instructor Jael watched with her 6 eyes, saying nothing. The rules were clear. The drill continued until one student landed a clean hit, or the defender was struck. Sorath swung his upper arms in a wide combination. Kira ducked under the first, sidestepped the second, and pivoted away from the third. He came again, faster, harder. She moved like water. Every strike missed, not by luck, but by precision, as if she could see his arms moving before they moved. She was reading his body, the shift of his weight, the tension in his shoulders, the direction of his eyes. She simply did not let him touch her. It went on for 90 seconds, and 90 seconds was a long time when a Drenaki was trying to hit you with 4 arms. The watching students grew quiet. Sorath's breathing became heavy. His strikes became wild. Kira kept moving, smooth and calm, her face empty and focused. When Instructor Jael finally called the drill, Sorath had not landed a single hit. He stood in the center of the mat, chest heaving, humiliated. Kira stood at the edge, not even breathing hard. Torvax had watched the entire thing from across the training floor. His yellow eyes burned. It happened 1 hour later. Kira was leaving the training wing when the crowd in the main corridor suddenly parted. She felt the vibration of heavy footsteps behind her, before she heard his voice. Human. She stopped and turned. Torvax stood 5 meters away. The corridor was packed with students, and all of them had gone still. Something about the way he stood, the way his venom ridges glowed faintly along his forearms, told everyone that this was not another insult or another shove. This was something else. I, Torvax Rel, of the Drenaki 9th bloodline, invoke the right of the Crucible. His voice was formal now, carrying the weight of ritual. I mark you for combat. He closed the distance in 2 strides. Before anyone could move, he pressed his right forearm against Kira's collarbone. His venom ridge flared, and Kira felt a sharp, burning pain spread across her skin. She did not scream. She did not flinch. She sucked in a breath through her teeth and held her ground. When he stepped back, there was a glowing chemical mark on her collarbone, a burn that pulsed with faint green light. The mark. The corridor was completely silent. Lyra pushed through the crowd, her glow blazing white with panic. No, no, he cannot do this. She is a child. She is a student of this academy, Torvax said coldly. The rules are the same for all. He was right, and everyone knew it. The Crucible was sacred. Any student could mark any other student for a formal duel. It had been this way for centuries. Refusal meant only one thing: expulsion. Within minutes, Instructor Jael arrived. She looked at the mark on Kira's collarbone, then at Torvax, then back at Kira. Her 6 eyes moved in a slow pattern that meant she was processing something complex. The mark has been given, Jael said. Her voice was flat, procedural. Kira Vasquez, by the traditions of this academy, you may accept the challenge and enter the Crucible, or you may decline and forfeit your place here. What is your answer? Every eye in the corridor was on Kira. She was small. She was bruised from training. She had a venom burn throbbing on her collarbone. She was standing in a corridor full of aliens who were all bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than she would ever be. She looked up at Torvax. Then she looked at Jael. I accept. Zael's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. In 200 years of teaching, she had performed this ritual dozens of times. She had never once been surprised by the answer. She was surprised now. The news spread through the academy like fire. By evening, every student knew. The Dranaki champion had marked the human girl. The small one. The quiet one. There would be a crucible match. Bets were placed on every floor of every dormitory wing. The odds were not close. No one bet on Kira. Not because they disliked her, but because the math was simple. Torvax was 3 meters of armored muscle with 4 arms and venom. Kira was a 12-year-old human girl who weighed less than one of his arms. The expected outcome was not a fight. It was an execution. That evening, Kira went to the medical bay to have the venom burn treated. The medic, a gentle Quilari with soft fur and sad eyes, cleaned the wound carefully. The venom had left a permanent mark, a silvery scar that would never fade completely. "You know," the Quilari said softly, "you could still leave. Go home. No one would blame you." Kira looked at the scar on her collarbone. It was ugly, and it hurt, and it would be with her forever. She touched it with her fingertips. "My father has scars too," she said. "He got them protecting people. He never left." The medic said nothing more. Back in her quarters, Kira opened the small case under her bed. She took out the mouthguard and held it in her hands. It was old and worn, and it smelled like home. She read her father's note one more time. Small does not mean soft. She put the mouthguard in and bit down. Then she stood in the middle of her small room and began to stretch. Her body was sore, and her collarbone burned, and the biggest fight of her life was coming. She did not know if she could win. She did not know if she would survive. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not kneel. The Crucible Arena sat at the heart of the academy like a stone fist. It was a massive circular pit, carved from smart stone, a material that could shift and change during a fight, raising walls, creating slopes, opening gaps. Around the pit, tiered galleries rose high, enough seats for every student and instructor in the academy. Today, every single seat was full. This was the most watched Crucible match in 10 years. Not because anyone expected it to be a real contest. They came to see what would happen when the Academy's most dangerous student fought its weakest. They came the way people always came, to see something that would be over quickly. With curiosity and a little bit of guilt. Torvax Rel entered the arena first. The crowd erupted. He was massive, nearly 3 meters of dense bone plating and rippling muscle. His 4 arms spread wide as he walked to the center of the pit. His venom ridges pulsed with a faint green glow. He rolled his neck, cracked the joints in all 4 of his wrists, and looked up at the crowd like a king looking at his subjects. He had fought in the Crucible 11 times. He had won 11 times. 6 of those opponents had left the arena on stretchers. The cheering faded when Kira entered. She came through the far gate alone, and the silence that followed was so thick it had weight. She wore standard light combat gear. No armor plating, no augments, nothing but the basic training suit that every student received on their first day. Her mouthguard was in. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight knot. The venom scar on her collarbone was visible, silver against her brown skin. She was so small. That was what struck everyone. They all knew she was small. They had seen her in the corridors and the commissary, but seeing her here, in this arena, standing across from Torvax Rel, the difference was almost absurd. She looked like a child, standing in front of a building. Up in the gallery, Lyra Sonath sat with her hands pressed together. Her entire body dimmed to almost nothing. She could not glow. She was too afraid. In the highest observation box, Commander Droste Vaughn sat in his chair with his scarred hands resting on his knees. He was Gorvathi, old and enormous, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone by someone who was angry. He had not attended a Crucible match in 3 years. He was here now, and no one knew why. Instructor Zale Korath stood at the edge of the pit, her 6 eyes steady. She spoke the ritual words without emotion. The Crucible recognizes this challenge. The match ends at submission, incapacitation, or intervention by the presiding instructor. Both combatants have accepted. Let it begin. She dropped her hand. Torvax moved first. He was fast, terrifyingly fast, for something so large. He closed the distance in 3 strides, and swung his lower left arm in a wide arc, aimed at Kira's midsection. Had it connected, it would have ended the fight instantly. Kira threw herself sideways. The fist passed so close she felt the wind of it on her skin. She hit the ground, rolled, and came up on her feet 3 meters away. Torvax was already turning, already swinging again. His upper right arm came down like a hammer. She moved, not fast enough. The edge of his fist caught her shoulder and sent her spinning across the arena floor. She hit the smart stone hard and skidded to a stop near the far wall. The crowd murmured. Lyra covered her eyes. Kira got up. She was slow about it. Her left shoulder was already bruising, and she could feel the impact ringing through her bones. But she got up, set her feet, and faced him again. Torvax grinned. He was not worried. He walked toward her like someone taking a stroll, 4 arms swinging loosely. "Stay down, little human," he said. "It will hurt less." He hit her again. A sharp jab from his lower right arm that caught her in the ribs and lifted her off her feet. She landed on her back, gasping. She got up. He hit her again. An open palm slap from his upper left arm that snapped her head to the side and sent her stumbling into the arena wall. She got up. The crowd had stopped murmuring. The silence was different now. It was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of people watching something they did not understand. Torvax hit her 5 more times in the next 2 minutes. Each blow was harder than the last. He was not trying to end the fight quickly. He was punishing her, making an example, showing the entire academy what happened when a weak species stepped into a ring with a strong one. He laughed after the 4th hit. He spread all 4 arms wide and looked up at the crowd after the 5th. But after the 6th hit, he stopped laughing because Kira got up again. She was bleeding now. A cut above her left eye was sending a thin line of red down her face. Her left arm hung slightly wrong. Something was strained or torn in the shoulder. She was breathing hard, sharp little breaths through her mouthguard. But her eyes had not changed. They were the same eyes she had walked into the arena with. Steady, focused, not afraid. Torvax stared at her. For the first time since the fight began, his grin was gone. "Why do you keep getting up?" he asked. There was something in his voice that had not been there before. It was not anger, it was confusion. Kira spit blood onto the arena floor. She did not answer. She raised her hands into a guard position and waited. He came at her again, harder now, faster. 2 strikes from his upper arms, a sweeping kick, a follow-up from his lower left. It was a combination that had knocked out a Gorvathi warrior 2 months ago. Kira dodged the first strike. She slipped the second. She jumped over the kick, and the watching crowd gasped because no one jumps over a Dranaki kick. The 4th strike grazed her side, but she was already moving, already turning, and for the first time in the fight, she was not retreating. She was circling. Torvax noticed. He pressed forward, throwing combinations, using all 4 arms in overlapping patterns that should have been impossible to track. But Kira was tracking them. Her eyes moved with a focus that was almost mechanical, following his shoulders, his elbows, the shift of his weight from one foot to the other. She was not just surviving. She was studying him. She had been studying him since the first punch. Every hit she had taken, Every time she had been knocked down and gotten back up, she had been watching, learning, cataloging. The way he dropped his lower left shoulder before a big swing. The way his upper arms moved half a second before his lower arms. The slight pause he took after a forearm combination while his body reset. She was building a map of him inside her head, and she was building it with her own pain. It was something that humans did. Not all of them, and not all the time. But when a human was pushed far enough, when the situation was desperate enough, something changed in their brain. The fear did not disappear. It was rerouted, turned into fuel, turned into focus. Human scientists had a name for it, but the galaxy did not have a word for it yet, because the galaxy had never seen a species that got more dangerous the more you heard it. Torvax threw a massive right cross with his upper arm. It was his strongest punch, the one that had ended most of his fights. Kira dropped low, lower than he expected, lower than should have been possible, and the fist sailed over her head. In the same motion, she drove forward and struck. A single open palm hit, fast and precise, aimed at a specific point beneath his lowest left arm, where the bone plating was thinnest and a cluster of nerves lay close to the surface. The impact was not loud, it was not dramatic, but the effect was immediate. Torvax's entire left side seized, his lower left arm dropped. He staggered sideways, his yellow eyes wide with shock. The arena went dead silent. Every student, every instructor, every species in the gallery froze. Blood ran from her eyebrow and her lip. Her left arm was nearly useless. 3 of her ribs screamed with every breath. She spit blood again, set her feet on the smart stone floor, and raised her right hand into a guard. Her voice was quiet, calm, steady, but it carried through the silence of the arena like a bell. Something changed in the arena after Kira's first strike landed. It was not something you could see or hear. It was something you could feel, like the air pressure had shifted, like the room itself had tilted slightly, and everything was sliding in a new direction. Torvax felt it. He stood in the center of the pit, his lower left arm still numb from the nerve strike, and he looked at the small human girl standing across from him with blood on her face and fire in her eyes. For the first time in his fighting career, a thought entered his mind that had never been there before. She is not afraid of me. She had never been afraid of him. Not in the corridor when he knocked her datapad away. Not when he pressed his venom ridge into her collarbone. Not when she walked into this arena knowing he could kill her. He had mistaken her silence for weakness. He had mistaken her calmness for submission. He was wrong. Her silence was not the silence of something afraid. It was the silence of something waiting. Up in the observation box, Commander Draste Vaughn leaned forward in his chair. He had not leaned forward for a student in 40 years. Torvax attacked. He was not playing anymore. He was not showing off for the crowd. He came at her with all 4 arms working in coordinated patterns, the way he fought when he truly wanted to end someone. He was still bigger, still stronger, still faster in raw speed. But Kira was not fighting the way she had before. She was not just defending anymore. She was using the arena. The smart stone floor had been shifting slowly throughout the fight, creating low ridges and shallow depressions as it always did during crucible matches. Most fighters ignored the terrain changes. Kira had been tracking every single one. She moved to a section of the floor that had risen into a slight slope, and when Torvax charged, she used the elevation to dodge over his lower arms and drive a knee into the same nerve cluster she had hit before. He roared. It was a sound that shook the walls, a Dranaki pain response that made half the gallery flinch. His lower left arm went completely dead, hanging at his side like a piece of meat. 3 arms now. He was fighting with 3 arms, and the human girl was the reason why. He grabbed at her with his upper arms. She ducked, rolled between his legs, and came up behind him. Before he could turn, she kicked the back of his knee. It did not do much damage. He was too heavily armored for that, but it made him stumble. And in that stumble, she hit the nerve cluster a third time. Torvax swung wildly. His upper right arm caught Kira across the chest and sent her flying. She hit the arena wall with a crack that made Lyra scream in the gallery. Kira slid to the ground, and for a terrible second, she did not move. The Quillari medic on standby gripped his kit and stepped forward. Instructor Zale's hand drifted toward the intervention signal. Then Kira moved. She pressed her right hand against the wall and pushed herself up. Something was wrong with her ribs. Something was broken in there. She could feel the pieces grinding against each other with every breath, and the pain was a white-hot wire running through her chest. Her left arm was nearly useless. Her vision was blurry from the cut above her eye. But something else was happening inside her. Something that human doctors and scientists had studied for centuries without fully understanding. Her heart rate, which should have been slowing from damage and exhaustion, was increasing. Her pupils, which should have been contracting from pain, were dilating. Her hands, which should have been shaking, were steady. Her brain was flooding her body with adrenaline and endorphins, shutting down pain receptors, redirecting every ounce of energy to her muscles and her mind. Humans called it many things. The survival response, the override, the refusal. It happened when a human being was pushed past the point where their body should have quit, but their mind said no. It was the thing that let human mothers lift vehicles off their children, the thing that let human soldiers walk on broken legs, the thing that no other species in the galaxy had ever developed, because no other species had spent millions of years being hunted by everything on their home planet and surviving anyway. Kira was not fighting through the pain. The pain was gone. There was nothing left but focus and will, and a 12-year-old girl who had decided that she was not finished. She attacked. Torvax was not ready for it. The girl who had spent the first half of the fight being beaten like a training dummy was now coming at him with a speed and precision that made his 3 remaining arms feel slow and clumsy. She struck his nerve cluster again. She targeted the joints between his bone plates where his flesh was exposed. She used his own size against him, staying inside his reach where his long arms could not generate full force, pressing against his body where his strikes became pushes instead of blows. He caught her once with his upper left arm, a glancing hit that opened a new cut on her cheek. She did not even blink. She used the impact to spin inside his guard and drove her elbow into the soft tissue under his jaw. Torvax's head snapped back. He stumbled. The crowd was making sounds now, not cheering, not booing, just sounds, a strange collective noise that was equal parts shock and something that might have been awe. He tried to grab her with all 3 working arms. She let him catch her, and the moment his arms closed around her, she twisted, found the nerve cluster one more time, and drove her thumb into it with everything she had. Torvax fell to one knee. His venom ridges flared bright green, a panic response, something Drenaki could not control. It was like a scream that his body made without his permission. The venom was not directed at anyone. It was just fear, leaking out of him in glowing green light. He grabbed for her with his upper arms, caught her around the waist, and tried to crush her. But Kira was already climbing. She used his own arms as handholds, pulled herself up his massive body, and locked both her arms around his thick neck from behind. She squeezed. Her right arm was strong. Her left arm was damaged, but she willed it to work, forced the muscles to close, and locked her hands together behind his head. It was a chokehold, a simple, ancient human technique that did not require strength or size. It required only the willingness to hold on. Torvax stood up. He thrashed. He reached behind him with his upper arms, trying to pull her off, but she was pressed tight against his back, tucked behind his head, where his arms could not reach at the right angle. He staggered backward and slammed his back into the arena wall. The impact was terrible. Kira felt her broken ribs shift. She felt something tear in her left shoulder. The pain broke through even the adrenaline, a white flash that filled her entire body. She heard Lyra screaming from far away. She felt blood running from her nose, her mouth, the cuts on her face. She did not let go. Her arms tightened. Her teeth clenched on her mouthguard. Every cell in her body screamed at her to release, to fall, to stop. She refused the way only a human could refuse, with a stubbornness that went deeper than muscle and bone, a stubbornness that lived in the soul. Instructor Halted activated the intervention signal. The arena's containment fields began to power up, a process that took exactly 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, Torvax slammed into the wall again. Kira held. He dropped to his knees. She held. His venom ridges dimmed. His forearms dropped, one by one. Upper right, upper left, lower right, and finally the lower left that had been dead since the middle of the fight. When the containment fields fully activated and pulled them apart, Torvax fell forward onto his face. He was unconscious. The instructor had halted the fight, but she had halted it too late. Not too late for Kira, too late for Torvax. Kira landed on the arena floor when the fields released her. She lay on her back for a moment, staring up at the high ceiling of the arena, breathing in sharp, wet gasps. Then, slowly, painfully, she rolled over and pushed herself to her feet. She stood over the unconscious body of the Academy's undefeated champion. She was broken. She was bleeding from 6 places. She could barely see out of her left eye. She swayed on her feet like a tree in a storm. But she was standing. The arena was silent. Not the silence of anticipation or the silence of confusion. This was the silence of 1,000 beings realizing, all at once, that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. Then Lyra's glow blazed. Not blue, not pink, not white with fear. It was gold. Bright, burning gold. A color that Pilari produced only in moments of overwhelming pride. It lit up her entire section of the gallery. Commander Draste Von stood up from this chair. He had not stood for a student in 40 years. The instructors around him stared. He said nothing. He simply stood. And that was enough. Instructor Halted looked down at the small human girl swaying in the arena below her. Her 6 eyes were wide, all of them, and in them was an expression that her species almost never displayed. An expression that had no proper Valith word. The closest translation was awe. Kira woke up 2 days later in the medical wing. The ceiling above her was soft white light, and the air smelled like antiseptic and something floral that the Quillari medics used to calm their patients. She blinked. Her left eye was swollen, but it opened. Her ribs ached with every breath, but they were breathing. She was alive. The Quillari medic from before stood beside her bed, checking a display that showed her vitals in both human and universal medical format. When he saw her eyes open, he set down his instruments and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. 3 cracked ribs, he said, a fractured left wrist, deep tissue bruising across 40% of your body, strained tendons in your left shoulder, lacerations on your face, your arms, and your back, a mild concussion, and a venom scar on your collarbone that will never fully heal. He paused. You should not be alive, Kira Vasquez. Then, she said, Can I have breakfast? The medic stared at her. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh, though Quillari laughter sounded more like a series of soft clicks. He brought her something that the food machine insisted was oatmeal. It was not oatmeal. She ate it anyway. Lyra came to visit within the hour. She walked into the medical wing with her glow set to a warm, steady gold. And she did not say anything at first. She just sat on the edge of Kira's bed and took her hand and held it. Her skin was warm, and her light pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. "The whole academy is talking about you," Lyra said finally. "Good things or bad things?" "Strange things." Lyra tilted her head. "They look at you differently now. In the corridors, in the commissary. When I walk past them, I hear them go quiet. Not the way they used to go quiet, like they were ignoring you. Now they go quiet, like they are being careful." "Careful of what?" Lyra's glow shifted to something softer. "Of you, of what you are." Kira frowned. "I am a 12-year-old girl with broken ribs." "You are a 12-year-old girl who broke the undefeated champion of the academy." Lyra squeezed her hand. "They are afraid of you now." Kira shook her head slowly, wincing at the pain in her neck. "I do not want them to be afraid." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Her glow dimmed to a thoughtful blue. "I do not think they are afraid of you specifically. I think they are afraid of what you represent. You were smaller, weaker, slower, less armored, and you had no venom and no claws. You had nothing, and you won. That is not supposed to be possible. And if it is possible for you, then everything they believe about strength and power and who is dangerous and who is not, all of it is wrong. That is what frightens them." Kira looked at her friend for a long time. Then she smiled, small and tired and real. "You are very smart, Lyra." "I know," Lyra said. Her glow turned pink. On the second evening, Instructor Halted came. She stood in the doorway of the medical bay for a full 30 seconds before entering, and Kira realized it was because the instructor was uncertain. Halted was never uncertain. It was strange to see her 6 eyes moving in an irregular pattern, searching for something that she could not quite find. She sat in the chair beside Kira's bed. She did not speak immediately. When she did, her voice was different from how it sounded in class. It was quieter, more careful. "I must tell you something," Halted said. "When the match began, I was prepared to stop it within the first 30 seconds. I expected Torvax to incapacitate you quickly, and I would intervene, and it would be over. That was what should have happened." "But it did not happen," Kira said. "No, it did not." Halted's 6 eyes fixed on Kira, all of them at once, which was something Valeth did only when they were giving their complete and total attention. "I have been an instructor at this academy for 207 years. I have trained Dreniki warlords who could crush starship hulls with their bare hands. I have trained Gorvathi berserkers who felt no pain. I have trained Valeth blade dancers who could kill with a gesture. None of them frightened me." She paused. "You frightened me, Kira Vasquez." Kira blinked. "Me? Not because of what you did to Torvax. That was remarkable, but combat is combat. I have seen remarkable things before." Halted leaned forward slightly. "You frightened me because I saw in your eyes that you would not have stopped. You would not have released that hold. Not if he had slammed you into the wall 10 more times. Not if every bone in your body had broken. You would have held on until one of you was finished. I saw that in you, and I did not know how to understand it." The room was quiet. Kira was quiet. She thought about the moment in the arena when she had locked her arms around Torvax's neck, and he had driven her into the wall. She remembered the pain, the white-hot flash, the feeling of something breaking inside her. She remembered her arms tightening instead of releasing. She remembered choosing not to let go. "That is not a human thing," she said softly. "That is just me." Halted tilted her head, a gesture she had picked up from watching her human student. "After the match, I reviewed your species' history, your wars, your disasters, your moments of crisis. I read about humans who carried wounded companions through deserts, humans who held collapsing buildings on their backs while others escaped, humans who fought predators 10 times their size with sticks and stones and refused to die. She paused again, and her 6 eyes held Kira's gaze with absolute certainty. "I believe you are wrong, Kira Vasquez. It is very much a human thing." The next day, Kira was called to Commander Draste Vaughn's office. She had never been there before. It was high in the station's command tower, a circular room with windows that looked out on the stars in every direction. The commander sat behind a desk that seemed too small for him, though it was the largest desk Kira had ever seen. Draste Vaughn was old. His Gorvathi skin was the color of dark iron, and it was covered in scars that mapped a lifetime of wars fought across a dozen star systems. He did not smile when Kira entered. She was not sure his face knew how. "Sit," he said. She sat. The chair was far too big for her. Her feet did not touch the floor. "The Compact of Species classifies humans as Class 12, he said. "The lowest classification for a sentient species. It means your kind is considered physically inferior to every other member species. Do you know this?" "Yes, sir." That classification was assigned when humanity joined the Compact 14 years ago. It was based on physical measurements, bone density, muscle mass, natural weaponry. By every metric, your species is at the bottom. Kira said nothing. She waited. Draste Vaughn looked at her with his ancient, scarred eyes. "I am recommending a reclassification." Kira's eyebrows rose. "To what?" The commander was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low, and there was something in it that might have been respect. "There is no classification for a species that simply decides it will not lose." He folded his massive hands on his desk. "I will have to create one." 4 days after the fight, Kira was well enough to walk the corridors again. Her ribs were wrapped, her wrist was in a healing brace, and the cuts on her face had been sealed to thin pink lines that would fade in time. The venom scar on her collarbone would not fade. She did not mind. She was walking toward the commissary when the corridor ahead of her went quiet. Students parted. And there, standing alone in the center of the hallway, was Torvax Rel. He looked diminished somehow. Not physically. He was still enormous, still armored, still towering over everything around him. But something in him had changed. Something behind his yellow eyes was different. Lyra stepped in front of Kira, her glow flaring white, but Kira gently moved her aside. Torvax looked down at Kira. She looked up at him. They stood like that for a moment, the giant and the girl, and the corridor held its breath. Then Torvax lowered himself. He bent his massive body forward, tucked his forearms against his chest, and bowed. It was a Dranaki gesture that Kira had read about, but never seen. It was reserved for those who had proven themselves in combat, those who had earned the right to be called not just an opponent, but a threat worthy of respect. He said nothing. He simply bowed, held it for 3 seconds, and then rose and walked away. Lyra stared after him with her mouth open. Kira watched him go, with a quiet expression that gave nothing away. That evening, she sat in her quarters and opened the small case under her bed. She placed the mouthguard inside, blood-stained now, a different color than when her father had given it to her. She looked at his note. She looked at the stars outside her viewport. Then she picked up her communicator and called home. Her father answered on the second ring. He was in his workshop. She could see the tools behind him and the grease on his hands. When he saw her face, the bruises and the bandages and the thin pink lines, his expression tightened. His jaw set. His eyes went bright. "Mija," he said. His voice was rough. "What happened?" "I had a fight, Papa." He looked at her for a long moment. He saw the bruises. He saw the bandages. He saw the scar on her collarbone. And he saw something else too. He saw that she was sitting up straight, and that her eyes were clear, and that she was not broken. "Did you get back up?" he asked. Kira smiled. It was small, and tired, and unbreakable. Every time, Papa. He nodded. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. He just nodded, and she could see that his eyes were wet. And that was enough. The next morning, Kira went to the commissary and sat at her usual table. Lyra was already there, glowing a warm gold. They ate together in comfortable silence. After a few minutes, a shadow fell across the table. A Gorvathi student, young and serious-faced, stood holding a tray. He looked at Kira, then at the empty seat beside her. "May I sit here?" he asked. Kira gestured to the chair. He sat. 5 minutes later, a Valit student joined them. Then a Polari who was not Lyra. Then a quiet young Quillari, who did not speak but smiled at Kira with her soft dark eyes. The table that had always been empty was full. And in the corridors of the Veyrath Galactic Combat Academy, in a dozen languages, in whispered conversations, and late-night messages, and quiet warnings passed from older students to younger ones, a new piece of wisdom was spreading. It was not a rule, it was not a law. It was something deeper than that, something learned in blood and silence, and the sight of a small girl who would not fall. The words did not translate perfectly into any alien language, but every species understood them. Do not mark the humans.